Imagine standing at the base of this incredibly jagged peak in the Alborz
Oh,
Mountains.
yeah. It's breathtaking. Just a massive, sheer rock face.
Exactly. You are gazing up like 2,163 meters into the sky at what the locals call the Eagle's Nest.
Right. And for centuries, that site and the ruins perched on top of it, well, they were shrouded in these really dark, sensational myths.
I mean, we're talking stories of drug-fueled zealots, absolute terror, basically an ancient syndicate of killers.
Yeah, but you have to remember why we only had those stories. The texts of the Ismailis were largely burned, and the Crusaders brought back these wildly exaggerated campfire tales.
So historians were just kind of stuck with this phantom narrative for a very long time.
Exactly. The only way to bypass all that surviving propaganda wasn't in libraries. It was, in the dirt.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to uncover the true story of Alamut Castle, which means looking past the myths.
Yeah, we are working with a really fascinating stack of historical analyses, archaeological reports, and some great literary insights today.
Right, especially details from the book The Unfinished Event. And we're going to explore two massive thumbs for you today. First, the 25-year archaeological epic to unearth the castle's true engineering brilliance.
And second, we're looking at the intense geopolitical chess match, the one between the Ismaili state and the mighty Seljuk Empire.
So if you think you know the story of the infamous Hashashin, prepare to have, well, basically everything you thought you knew completely rewritten.
Yeah, you are about to see how a forgotten mound of dirt became a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
It's an incredible transformation. But to really grasp the magnitude of what the people at Alamut built, we have to start by zooming out.
Right, we have to look at the geopolitical powder keg of the mid-11th century, because Hassan Saba and the Ismaili state didn't just rebel in a vacuum.
No, they were pushing back against a very specific, very powerful machine, right?
Exactly. They were up against this massive alliance between the Seljuk Turks and the Abbasid caliphs in Baghdad.
So let's get into the mechanics of that alliance. The sources point to the year 447 AH, or 1055 AD, as the major turning point.
Yeah, that year is crucial, because before the Seljuks even arrived on the scene, the Abbasid caliphs in Baghdad were essentially political prisoners in their own palaces.
Wait, really? The heads of the Sunni Islamic world were prisoners?
Basically, yeah. I mean, they were the spiritual heads, sure, but they had been politically dominated for over a century by the Buyid dynasty.
And the Buyids were Shia, right?
Right, so the Buyids kept the Sunni caliph around merely as a figurehead, just to prevent a massive uprising.
Ah, so it was all about optics.
Completely.
Yeah.
The Buyids held all the actual military and administrative power. The caliph was isolated and incredibly weak.
But then you have Tukrul Beg and the Seljuk Turks sweeping in from the Central Asian steppes.
Yes, and they end the Buyid dominance. They effectively liberate the Abbasid caliph.
And the caliph is so grateful, he rewards Tukrul Beg with this massive title, Sultan of the East and West.
Which is huge. It wasn't just a ceremonial honor. It was a massive transfer of legitimacy.
Like a corporate merger almost.
That's actually a perfect way to look at it. It was a highly calculated exchange of currencies.
The Abbasids had the legacy brand prestige, and the Seljuks brought the aggressive, hostile takeover legal team.
Exactly. The Seljuks had immense military capability. They had the cavalry, they had the sheer numbers. But what they lack was traditional institutional legitimacy.
Right, because they were migrating nomadic warriors, recently converted.
Right. They needed a legal and spiritual mandate to rule that went beyond just, the threat of the sword. And the caliph provided that mandate. He granted them the divine right to rule.
So in a single stroke, they go from being foreign conquerors to the undisputed, legally recognized rulers of the Islamic lands.
And in return, the caliph gets his protectors. The Seljuks position themselves as the official defenders of Sunnism.
It's a mutual survival pact. But according to the sources, it rapidly evolves into a total monopoly on power.
Yeah, and the architect of that monopoly was this brilliant Seljuk vizier named Khaja Nizam al-Mulk.
He was basically the administrative brain behind the throne.
He was, and he recognized the terrifying potential of this alliance. He realized that because the military and the spiritual authority were now fused, he could classify any political opposition as an attack on Islam itself.
Oh, wow. So he weaponized the alliance.
Exactly. If a local governor or a group of farmers objected to, say, Seljuk taxation policies, they weren't just political dissidents anymore.
They were branded as heretics.
Right, which made it legally and morally acceptable to just annihilate them. He merged state and religion so thoroughly that there was no space left for legitimate political discourse.
And the mechanism they used to extract wealth from all these territories was called the Iqta system, right?
Yes, the Eda system.
Yeah.
This is where we hit the core economic grievance that actually sparked the rebellion.
It was essentially a feudal land grant system. The central government didn't pay its military commanders in cash.
Right. They paid them with the tax revenues of specific agrarian plots. So a military commander becomes the feudal lord of that region.
Which sounds like a nightmare for the locals.
Oh, it was devastating. The farmers and artisans were suddenly at the mercy of military men who had absolutely no long-term interest in the sustainable development of the land.
Their only incentive was to extract maximum wealth as quickly as possible to fund their private armies.
Exactly. It completely cannibalized the agrarian economy.
Yeah.
And because of that ideological monopoly we mentioned, the people had no political recourse.
Right, because if you complain about a general starving your village, you're suddenly an enemy of the state and a heretic.
Which brings us to the autumn of 1090 AD, or 483 in the Islamic calendar.
Enter Hassan Sabah.
Right. Hassan Sabah recognized that you cannot fight a centralized monopoly by playing its game. You can't petition a court that considers your very existence a heresy.
So he captures the fortress of Alamut, and he spends the next 35 years there, establishing it as the primary base for the Nizari Ismaili state.
And we really need to contextualize the Ismailis here, based on the historical analyses we're working with.
Yeah, because the sources are very clear on this. This wasn't some fringe religious cult hiding in a cave.
Not at all. This was a highly organized, autonomous government operating directly within the borders of the Seljuk Empire.
So how does one man, sitting in a single mountain fortress, manage to project enough power to challenge an empire that stretches from the Mediterranean all the way to Central Asia?
By capitalizing on that massive, boiling resentment toward the Iqta system, he offered an alternative. A fiercely independent state that explicitly rejected both the political authority of Isfahan and the religious authority of Baghdad.
But wait, hold on. We're painting Hassan Sabah and the Ismailis as these noble, oppressed, agrarian freedom fighters.
Right.
But this is the group that practically authored the playbook on targeted political assassination. I mean, the very word assassin derives from them in Western languages.
That's yes.
Doesn't the sheer terror of that tactic, murdering people in the streets, in courts, in mosques, doesn't that justify the Seljuks viewing them as violent extremists?
Well, the tactic is undeniably brutal. But the sources suggest we have to analyze it through the lens of asymmetric warfare, rather than just modern morality.
Okay, asymmetric warfare.
Right. Hassan Sabah knew he couldn't field an army of 100,000 men to face the Seljuk cavalry on an open battlefield. It would be a complete slaughter.
So how do you dismantle a massive military machine when you are vastly outnumbered?
You target the architects of the empire's power directly. You remove the cogs from the administrative machine.
Like cutting the head off the snake.
Exactly. The most famous example is actually the assassination of Khaja Nizam al-Mulk himself.
Oh, wow. They got the vizier who built the monopoly.
They did. By removing key military commanders and political figures, Hassan Sabah could completely paralyze the Seljuk command structure.
And I guess that requires minimal loss of Ismaili life while creating maximum psychological disruption?
Precisely. It's precision warfare versus broad, sweeping battlefield carnage. But because that tactic was so effective and so terrifying to the Seljuk elite, the empire had to invent a narrative.
A narrative to explain the sheer dedication of Sabah's operatives. Which brings us to the famous mythology of the Hashashin.
Yes, the narrative that Marco Polo popularized, which was repeated in Crusader chronicles and cemented in Western literature.
It's incredibly cinematic, honestly. The story goes that Hassan Sabah would drug his followers with hashish, right?
Right, take them into this lush, secret garden filled with earthly delights, convince them they were in paradise.
And then tell them the only way to return to paradise permanently was to carry out his assassinations and die in the process.
It's a great story for a fantasy novel. But when you look at the research, particularly the findings by Fatema Ali Asghar in her book, The Unfinished Event,
the entire hashish narrative just completely falls apart.
it makes zero mechanical sense. These operatives were infiltrating the highest courts of the Seljuk Empire.
Right. They often lived deep undercover for years, posing as merchants or scholars before they found the right moment to strike.
And that requires an extraordinary level of linguistic mastery, patience, social intelligence, and just intense discipline.
Which you definitely do not get from being heavily dosed with narcotics. I mean, hashish does not produce meticulous, hyper-focused, patient undercover agents.
Exactly. The true driving force wasn't a drug-induced hallucination. It was intense political motivation, a passion for justice against the feudal oppression of the Seljuk state.
It's fascinating, really. Why is it so much easier for the public to believe a sensationalized story about drug-crazed zealots rather than accepting the reality of politically motivated, disciplined freedom fighters?
Well, it's a defense mechanism for the empire. Think about it. If your massive, invincible military is being systematically dismantled by a small group of rebels, you cannot admit that those rebels are smarter than you.
Or that they actually have a valid grievance regarding your tax policies.
Right. You have to dehumanize them. You label them as drugged-out fanatics. It absolves the state of having to engage with the actual socioeconomic reasons that caused the rebellion.
It shows how powerful propaganda can be when it outlives the people it was used against. The myth survived because it was useful.
Highly useful. To the Seljuks, to later Western writers who wanted an exotic villain, and to the Crusaders who needed an excuse for their own military failures.
And because that myth became the dominant narrative for centuries, the only way to find the truth today was to physically excavate the site.
We had to literally dig for it.
Let's talk about that. Flashback to the year 2001, which is 1380 in the Iranian calendar.
At that point, Alamut was basically just an abandoned dirt mound on top of a terrifyingly high rock.
No one believed it held global significance. But then enter Dr. Hamideh Choubak.
Dr. Choubak's work at Alamut is one of those monumental achievements in modern archaeology.
She dedicated 25 years of her life to this single site.
Yes, 25 years. She led 16 continuous excavation seasons to bring the fortress out of the dust.
Think about what it actually takes to dig at that location. You are at an altitude of over 2,100 meters.
In the Alborz Mountains, the logistics alone are an absolute nightmare.
Right, you've got harsh weather, freezing temperatures, sheer physical danger working on the edge of cliffs.
And the monumental task of just getting tools, water, and personnel up to the peak every single day.
It's like she walked up to a pile of dust and rubble and was the only one who could see the blueprints of a masterpiece beneath it. Her vision and stamina were just unparalleled.
It wasn't just a physical challenge either. It was a battle against historical inertia.
Because everyone just saw it as a ruined terrorist bunker.
Exactly. She was fighting centuries of neglect. Her meticulous documentation of every stone and every shard of pottery was required to prove, empirically, that a highly sophisticated civilization existed there.
And all that effort culminated in a really deeply emotional moment. The sources note that at a UNESCO meeting in Busan, South Korea, she wept tears of joy.
Yeah. When Alamut was officially registered as Iran's 30th World Heritage Site, it's a profound story of female perseverance, completely rewriting history.
And what Dr. Choubak and her team actually found completely shattered the image of Alamut as a solitary, isolated military bunker.
The popular image was always just one lonely castle sitting on a rock, cut off from the world. But the reality was vastly different.
Right. Alamut, which, by the way, was originally built by a figure named Vasudhan, long before Hassan Saba, wasn't a solitary fort.
No, it was the central node of a massive 2,000 square kilometer integrated defensive landscape.
2,000 square kilometers.
Yes. The excavations revealed a network of 7 main interconnected castles, including massive strongholds like Lambesar, Nevizar Shah, and Shirkuh.
But how do you coordinate a defense across that kind of vertical, harsh topography? I mean, without modern radios, how does a 2,000 square kilometer network even function?
The genius was in the geographical placement. The castles were situated with such precise topographic awareness that they maintained direct line of sight with each other across the valleys and peaks.
So they established a rapid communication network.
Exactly. They were bouncing data via line of sight across the mountains, using polished metal or mirrors during the day, and specific smoke or fire signals at night.
It's essentially a 12th century fiber optic network.
That's a great analogy. This invisible net, cast over the mountains, entirely bypassed the Seljuk armies marching down below.
Wow. So if a Seljuk force entered a valley 50 miles away,
An outer fort observed them, flashed a signal across the peaks, and within minutes, the command center at Alamut knew exactly where the enemy was, their troop strength, and their trajectory.
that completely neutralizes the numerical superiority of the Seljuk forces.
Completely. You can have an army of 50,000 men, but if you have to march them single file through a narrow mountain pass and the enemy is watching you from above, your numbers mean absolutely nothing.
Because the Seljuks were fundamentally a cavalry-based army, right?
Right, they dominated flat terrain and open steppes. The Ismailis forced them to fight in a vertical landscape where horses were utterly useless and traditional siege engines couldn't be deployed effectively.
So the defensive landscape dictated the terms of every single engagement.
Exactly. But as you know, dictating the terms of engagement only works if you can actually outlast the enemy.
Right, because a fortress is only as strong as its water supply. How do you survive a siege, what they called a Charbanden, when you are trapped on top of a 2,000-meter rock?
The water engineering that Dr. Choubak's team uncovered is arguably the most astounding part of the whole archaeological record. It was a primary driver for the UNESCO designation.
Because they engineered systems that shouldn't have been possible in the 11th and 12th centuries. Let's get into the mechanics of this because it's just mind-boggling.
Sure.
First off, where is the water even coming from? They're on the highest peak around.
They sourced the water from the Koldar Spring, which was actually located on a neighboring northern mountain.
Okay, so you have a spring on another mountain. You have a deep valley between you and the fortress. How do you get the water across the gap and up into Alamut?
Through a highly complex system of channels cut directly into the rock face. Within these channels, they laid clay pipes, known as tunbusha.
Clay pipes, how big were they?
Relatively small, about 10 centimeters in diameter. They utilized a combination of gravity, siphoning, and precise pressure management to route the water down the northern mountain across the saddle and push it up into the Alamut complex.
Wait, if they're using clay pipes for a pressurized siphon system, how are the pipes not just bursting at the lowest point of the valley from the pressure? They didn't have modern rubber gaskets or high tensile steel.
That's the brilliance of it. The structural integrity relied on the interlocking design of the tunbusha and a highly specialized water-resistant mortar used to seal the joints.
And the 10-centimeter diameter was on purpose, right?
Exactly. By keeping the diameter small, they minimized the surface area subjected to outward pressure while maintaining flow velocity. It requires a true mastery of fluid dynamics and atmospheric pressure to maintain the vacuum necessary to pull the water upward into the fortress without the whole system failing.
They essentially built a 12th century smart grid for water. It's a masterclass in survival engineering.
It really is, but piping it in is only half the battle. They had to store massive quantities for these protracted sieges.
So where did they put it all?
The excavations revealed dozens of rock-cut cisterns. They literally hollowed out the interior of the mountain to create vast storage tanks. In the southwest section of the fortress, there is a massive pool measuring 8 by 5 meters.
And the specific catchment system for that pool is fascinating. The sources say it stays full entirely from seasonal precipitation.
Yes, the angles of the surrounding architecture and the rock cuts were designed to perfectly capture and funnel every single drop of